And now for our program. Kevin Davis is the Chief Information Officer at Davidson College and is responsible in that role for information technology at the institution, including that delivered by the Technology and Innovation Division, which he leads, as well as the broader institutional strategy for IT. He's worked in information technology and higher education for nearly 30 years, beginning as a help desk technician in his first year of college in 1994. Along with his work as the college's Chief Information Officer, Kevin directly leads the team responsible for cybersecurity and information security at Davidson. Kevin joined Davidson as our Deputy Chief Information Officer in 2017, and during his first 2 years, focused on developing and implementing a comprehensive security strategy and modernizing our IT infrastructure. Before Davidson, Kevin held a number of technology leadership roles at Duke University, culminating as the program director for global IT secure service delivery, supporting Duke's travelers and partnership sites in China, Kenya, and Tanzania, and elsewhere. He has a bachelor's degree from Harvard College and an MBA from Boston University. I am thrilled to turn this program over to Kevin.
Thank you, Judith, for the very warm welcome and introduction. And thank you to all the alumni and friends of the college who joined tonight. Looking forward to talking about what I think is unfortunately a really timely subject and something that doesn't disappear from the headlines. And that was actually a motivating factor behind the idea of this talk is it seems like we can do so many other things in society and solve big problems, but why does cybersecurity seem to not get better? I'm going to try to explain this in certainly touching on technical topics, but this really isn't intended as a technical talk, but rather looking at sort of the strategic factors and socio-political and economic factors as well that play into what causes this problem. And my central thesis through this talk is that there's really, there we go. There's really, now of course there's a technical problem, right? Adam, I'm having trouble controlling the slides to go forward. There we go. Always going to be an IT problem, right, when I'm giving a talk. Fundamentally, my argument is that there are two interlocking reasons why we continue to see so many cybersecurity failures. First, humans are part of the equation, and we can't eliminate the role of people. People can be naturally fallible, as people are when they make errors or fall for scams. And of course, other humans as bad actors are creating victims. They're inducing us to click on that link or to send information or to give up our passwords. So the human factor just cannot be taken out of the equation. And secondarily, there's not really an overarching technical solution because the so-called attack surface or kind of the domain that organizations like Davidson and workplaces, government organizations, nonprofits around the world, what we have to defend is just so large and there's so many points of entry that make it really impossible to have perfect defense. The first element that I want to talk about here is the human factor. And I've sort of given a kind of a diagram here of what we'll be talking about. Everything from so-called state-sponsored actors involved in cybercrime through criminals, insider threats, and then just plain old human error, which is a major cause of these issues. So the conundrum, as I was talking about a couple of slides ago, is that anyone who uses any technology that's on a network like the internet, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, an email account, the web, has the potential to be a victim of and part of a cybersecurity breach. But making it worse, there are bad actors who have a lot of practical protection from law enforcement as well as from being stopped financially. And they can operate from anywhere on Earth and often do operate from developing nations and nations outside the United States. And borders do not provide protection in the same way that they do for physical threats. So state-sponsored actors, that top of the pyramid. If you've ever seen the movie Mission Impossible, I always use this example of Tom Cruise coming down on a zip line into a computer room to steal data. When I'm talking with our college leadership and others about the threat we really can't defend against. If someone's going to go to that effort and have that ability to do that kind of an attack, there's really not much you can do. So at the most extreme, you really have, in some cases, are dealing with bad actors who have unlimited time, resources, the ability to target you. And we'll talk more about vulnerabilities later on, but often there are ways that they can enter systems that only they know about, which has other implications for the broader ecosystem of cybersecurity. Cyber criminals are probably, to me, one of the most, or the much more threatening category of threat actors. And there's a number of things that have made cybercrime get worse, not better, over the last couple of decades. And it's really rampant around the world. Ransomware is something we all hear about, where a cyber criminal puts software onto a laptop or systems throughout an organization or the applications you run that lock down and encrypt your data, and they refuse to give back the data or give you the key to get it back without making a payment. They do not have to be at your organization. The attackers can and often are anywhere, including in countries in Eastern Europe, Africa, Asia. It's really all over the world where these operations are based, and often virtual operations. There's not a site that you can go and make an arrest of 60 people at. The individuals in these groups may never have met, but meet over apps like Telegram or Signal and communicate there entirely virtually. Some even actually have human resources departments that manage things and finance departments that distribute the money. I mean, they're very well organized groups. One of the real key factors that's made it difficult has been cryptocurrency. Before, if you were to steal $1 million from an organization, you've got to wire those funds. It's easier to trace. You're going to make, probably an in-person appearance in a financial institution. But having cryptocurrencies that can be traded and accessed around the world, they're not entirely anonymous. There are sleuths who do track Bitcoin transactions and do excellent work in that space, but it's far, far easier. And the chance to collect large amounts of money is much greater with cryptocurrency. And then finally, one of the real challenges in defending against cyber criminals, if you're defending an organization from a security perspective, you can't ever have a bad day. Your systems are on 24/7, that you always have to have those defenses working, but the bad actor attacking you only has to find one way in. Sometimes you'll see in presentations people talk about, millions of emails stopped. I have one of those slides later on, or millions of attacks against a firewall. If you imagine the analogy of a house and a burglar who comes up and tries the front window on your house to see if it's open to break in, we always have that sense in cybercrime someone is coming and targeting you. But in many cases, these individuals write software programs that in a matter of hours can test millions and tens of millions of windows around the world, and they're constantly checking them. So the cost of an error, even if caught quickly, can be very, very high. So all of these factors make cyber criminals a real challenge. And interestingly, there's a tremendous overlap between cyber criminals and state-sponsored actors. You often will hear in the news about ransomware gangs operating in Russia or other CIS, former Soviet states. News reports have widely stated that Russia hires members of these groups as freelancers in order to take on some of the spycraft and state-sponsored hacking that they want to do. In exchange for that, these groups are free from prosecution in these countries. In fact, one interesting thing that often appears in ransomware forums and in ransomware code itself is if a computer system is using a Cyrillic keyboard, the alphabet used in Russia, they're designed not to actually encrypt the system because there are perceived as more consequences if they attack the so-called friendly host society and nation where this work happens. And Russia isn't the only source of this. North Korea is also a major source of ransomware. There, it's monetarily motivated as a workaround for American and Western sanctions. You're even hearing now about North Korean folks who've been trained in IT who get virtual jobs working for Western companies, doing virtual work, whether they're doing it themselves or using AI or other ways to help. And they're both sending those profits back into North Korea to fund nuclear and defense and other programs, but also in many cases are trying to steal data and work their way into the systems. So beyond cyber criminals, as though we didn't have enough to worry about, there's the everyday human who chooses to be a bad actor. So whether it's someone who is unhappy with an organization or they feel motivated by a political purpose or a cause and feel some kind of lashing out or protest is appropriate, And then finally, individuals who can, as employees or members of an organization, are sometimes recruited by those outside the organization and given money to take actions against systems. One of the most common of these in recent years has been what are called SIM swapping attacks. So a SIM card you may have heard of is the little chip or the virtual chip inside your phone that connects it to Verizon or T-Mobile, whoever your cell phone carrier is. There are cases where individuals have been paid to make hundreds of dollars, perhaps more, for logging into someone's account and reassigning that phone number to another SIM card. So a person you don't know suddenly is getting your phone calls and messages. Now, I get enough spam phone calls that there's days I wish someone would take my number. But the risk here is that so many websites validate you by sending you a text message. So if I'm now getting your text messages, I can now log into the site as you if I already have your password. We'll talk more towards the end of this presentation about tips you can do to protect yourself from these things. Other examples are soliciting individuals to leave a random flash drive, USB stick at an organization, or to plug it into a computer. That's all you need to do, just plug it in. These can be really hard to detect. And if someone, especially someone who's not a terribly happy employee, is offered thousands of dollars as a reward for doing this, that can be pretty motivating. And then finally, the risk when individuals leave an organization, particularly if they're unhappy, of downloading and taking data with them, either for purposes of some kind of cause or grudge they wish to settle with the organization, or for perceived financial gain. But then far and away, where so many things happen at the end of these processes is what I'll call human error by the well meaning. So this can take a couple of forms. This can take the form of the individual's role in becoming a victim, right, by accidentally clicking a link or typing the wrong address into a web browser and going to the wrong website. So it can also happen just from human error. So there have been several cases over the years at other colleges, universities, and academic medical centers where someone left a laptop in a trunk of a car and it got stolen, or left a flash drive or a tablet on a subway train and it wasn't found again, and it had lots of data on it. So it's very, very easy for individuals to, by accident, contribute to cybersecurity problems. With the scams that are out there, and there's a whole range of them. I mean, we know phishing for email. We know people talk about smishing for SMS-based or text message-based phishing. There is a really pernicious one called, and pig butchering is the term that has taken on for it. I don't particularly like it, but it's where individuals get a text message from someone. It's a wrong number text message. They were trying to reach someone else. It's not them. They're friendly. They end up in a conversation, and often either through friendship or romance, manage to build a relationship over weeks and months, culminating in getting the individual to participate in what looks like a good investment and turns out to be a way of scamming their money. And I say that it's a really pernicious crime because it's not just the individuals who have money stolen who are the victims here. Many of the people who are involved in these scams are in countries such as Myanmar, often the victims of human trafficking, living in compounds that have really squalor-like living conditions and very high-speed internet. And they are, by pain of physical violence, forced to participate in these scams. It's a really serious human rights problem and a major cybersecurity problem. The reality is most people aren't expecting that the email they're getting or the pop-up ad that they see or the phone call they get is a scam, right? We assume the best of people. And it's hard to know what the biggest scams are. 2 years ago, I wouldn't be mentioning pig butchering. I wouldn't be mentioning the messages saying that you have overdue tolls due. These have all been evolving because what cyber criminals do is they always change their methods. And individuals at both extremes of the age spectrum are probably at the most risk. Seniors have long been targeted by bad actors for scams of all sorts. And as more seniors are online and have cell phones and the like, that's only getting worse. And younger individuals, kids and teens, are also at quite a bit of risk because they may never have encountered this before. Most of us in the work world get phishing emails regularly enough that we sort of recognize them. But if it's your first time, How do you know what to expect? Younger individuals are also very comfortable sharing their lives online and communicating with people they've only met online, which can lead to extortion scams and all kinds of other issues, which sadly we see in higher education. We see our students falling victims to these at times as well. And for individuals who take technology for granted because they always grew up with it, it doesn't always mean that they're more savvy about these scams. It may mean that they're more open and engaged and trusting of technology and can be victimized by it. So the fundamental challenge here, my argument is that bad actors are really hard to stop. We'll never get rid of state-sponsored actors. And because of the presence of cryptocurrencies and the geopolitical rift between Russia and the West and North Korea and the West, it's very, very difficult to get any cooperation on arresting or financially penalizing cyber criminals. On the other hand, more than 5.5 billion people have some kind of internet access. Any device you have, any service you have, any email address you have can be targeted. Often they're not targeting you. The best ones will. And in fact, things like SIM swapping are often going after people's cryptocurrency wallets, trying to steal their Bitcoin and other funds. But often people just buy lists of email addresses. They take out or purchase domain names that are maybe a typo away from a legitimate website. They just want anyone who walks in the door. These are examples, by the way, of some of these scam messages that, as we say up here, inundate modern life. The middle one of these is one of these pig butchering schemes, and how over a long conversation someone is induced into participating in these scams. I would imagine more than one of you in the audience have gotten a message like the ones on the left. There's the toll road messages. There's the USPS has a package for you. You need to click here to accept delivery. And notice that they are trying to get you to do several things on this. They need you to reply yes, because the iPhone won't let you copy and paste that link out of it unless you've done certain things to be able to, or rather to have it be a hyperlink, unless you actually have a relationship with that individual. You respond to the message. So they're always trying to work around the best defenses that we have. So with that said, again, we rely on technology to solve so many other things for us. Can this be something where technology itself is what saves us? Do we just need better cybersecurity tools? But the problem is, because of all the roles that humans play, that's multiplied by all the various factors there are. Your laptop, your smartphone, your tablet, the applications and data centers for your organization or companies like Microsoft and Google, technology around your home, a smart doorbell, or your home router. All of these network devices, multiplied by all of these individuals trying to exploit them or use them, or susceptible to making an error when confronted with a cybersecurity risk, literally just creates an innumerable number of interaction points. So technology can and does defend against certain kind of cyber threats, but there are so many ways to attack. So a motivated attacker can always find some way in past those defenses. As I've said, there's so many of these network systems, some of which are easier to defend, some of which are harder. Bad actors are always coming up with new ways to try to defraud or steal or otherwise cause problems. And when you have new countermeasures, they evolve their methods to bypass them. Even when we have warnings, we have cases where end users bypass defenses. You will have sometimes web pages that come up if you click on a dangerous link that warn you, but then there's, if there is if you're sure, proceed here. We have technology that adds warnings to the beginning of messages we think are risky. We put them in people's junk folders, and sometimes people take them out and interact with them. That's just human nature. Maybe it really looks legitimate to you. We always say in IT that the only perfect technology that's perfectly secure has no end users, right? It's sitting in a room, locked up, no one can access it. But the whole point of technology is to be used to help us be productive, to help us be social, engaged. So it's not an option that we can necessarily choose, to say the least. One of the things I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about, and this gets a little into the technical side, are these things called vulnerabilities. These are flaws in systems. What leads to a flaw? It can be that the person who wrote the software didn't think about a way that someone could exploit it. Think about a form on a web page. You're going in to type an email address, a password, a credit card number. Over the years, people have found ways to instead of putting in a name, put in characters and other information, even lines of code into fields. And then when the website processes that, it sees it not as Kevin Davis, but it sees it as a computing instruction. And these so-called injection attacks are one way to try to break into a website. But there's so many of these. Programmers aren't perfect. And often software programs, they aren't written from the ground up. Most software programs build on what are called libraries or other piece of code. Think of it as Lego blocks, right? You might only be building the top 20% of the application, but you're relying on lots of other pieces. The operating system, the web server, the technology interacts with the world, database software, all these other pieces of software. It's not just the errors in the code you write, but it's the errors in all the other code that's there. And when these vulnerabilities are discovered, you don't just have to fix your application. You have to find and update all the various pieces of your application, many of which are written as open source, as it's called, and are just out on the internet for download. Do you even know you're vulnerable? The security community tracks about 5,000 what are called CVEs, and I'll use that as a shortcut. Just think of that as a taxonomy for vulnerabilities. It's a barcode or an identification number. That way everyone in the industry knows what we're talking about. If I say it's 2025-0019, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Not only are upwards of 60,000 of these discovered per year, but there's an average of 11 known new exploited vulnerabilities leading to compromise of one organization or many organizations per week. So this is continuous 24-hour-a-day work to keep systems defended. Fixing these can be very hard. If you're really lucky, a vendor has identified a fix and they have a software patch you can download. Think about your phone. How annoyed do we get that this week we downloaded iOS 18.4 and 3 days later 18.4.1 is out, and maybe the next week 18.4.2 is out. You're constantly being prompted to update your phone. Those are easier to install than many of the other fixes that are out there. If we're going to install a fix on our college payroll system or the system that keeps our transcripts or processes financial aid or gifts to the college, it really causes an impact to the organization if those systems are down. So you have to test them first, and you have to find a time you can do these. That's assuming that it's a system that there are still updates for. Many systems running out there are outdated or end of life. Companies should replace them when they get to that place, just like if a vehicle is wearing out or a roof needs replacement, you fix those things. But that's not real life, and there's other priorities and pressures, and sometimes it's hard for organizations to do what they should. If you've hired someone to write custom code for you, how do you keep that maintained? Often, and this has been a problem in higher education for years, students write a piece of code and they want to put it onto the web and host it forever. But students graduate, and the next group of students has a different set of priorities. They want to work on different things. Well, who's maintaining that software code? And if you have that web server in the wrong place, if I break into there, it is what we call a transit point for what's called so-called lateral movement. Just like lateraling a football in a game of American football. You start at one player, move to another, keep running down the field, keep moving side to side, and that helps you get around the defenses. Same concept here. There are automated testing tools. So we subscribe to one tool that runs on all of our public IP addresses, all of our internal IP addresses, and our vendor IP addresses twice a month. Because that's not enough, we also subscribe to a free service from the Department of Homeland Security that watches for signs of vulnerabilities and notifies us. And to be safe, we have a third service that's out there also looking for vulnerabilities, because none of these testing tools are perfect. So we have multiple sources to alert us if we have these problems. But even then, are you really sure that it's catching every vulnerability? They're trying them one at a time, but sometimes people do what's called chaining vulnerabilities. I'm going to exploit this, and then this, and then this. Like jumping checkers. If I do all those in the right order, I can make something happen. And until that attack is seen in the wild, as they say, then the folks who write the defensive software can't be ready for that. As I mentioned earlier, the scans are continuous for exploitable systems. Even just in the late 2010s, it could take weeks or months for an exploit to occur. There was a case a few years ago where the NSA had a series of toolkits that they had built. There were weaknesses in Microsoft Windows and other software. They hadn't informed the vendors about them. They kept them as their own secrets in order to be able to make use of them against other countries. in what was probably a geopolitical response aimed at the US and sort of hitting back at the NSA, a group that was probably state linked, but no one's exactly sure, leaked those exploits on the web. And it took a few weeks before something happened, but most likely the North Koreans took those out there and used them on attacks on the West. So, Party A and Party B were fighting, and Party C got involved and created problems for everyone. And when there are vulnerabilities that are widespread, the ones you read about on CNN or in the Times, those, again, we used to have more time to prepare for them, but often exploits can happen within days or even hours, and if we're very unlucky, even sooner. Again, like the case with your phone, as I'm mentioning, it's not just technology teams, but the general public that has to play a role. So think about how often we tend to say no to the updates on our computers or our phones. That keeps them vulnerable. And if they get into your device, they can try and get into other devices. Again, that lateral movement. So your personal computer, your smartphone, those are relatively easy to update. On the other hand, things like industrial technologies, the systems that keep your, if you're in an organization that has a campus or offices, the things that keep your HVAC running, the things that keep a boiler running, or a municipal water system running, electrical distribution network running. Those probably don't have computers. They have embedded controllers and microchips. Who goes out and patches those? Those are online too. At home, the smart camera you have in your home, the streaming devices you have, your home internet router, what hooks up to the internet and provides some protection from the outside world. All of those need updates too. One of the biggest risks with some of the technology that's out there for smart homes in particular, I would say two risks. One is people are price motivated by the purchase price. So I can buy a $120 doorbell from a company like Google and Amazon who have good security reputations, and they're probably pretty likely to provide updates. Or I can buy one for $25 from a company I've never heard of. Maybe they don't go to the same effort and can't afford to keep them secure. Or maybe there's malicious code on it that they knew about or didn't know about. So people tend to purchase devices that can be risky from the start. And then secondly, I'll be the first to admit, when I get the message from Amazon that I've got to pay my annual fee for my doorbell so I can get recording access, on the one hand, I get frustrated, but on the other hand, that money helps to keep the device secure because they have an ongoing business and revenue stream to keep them updated. Without that, many companies let these technologies just fall into disrepair. And the fact they haven't told you it needs an update may mean they don't know it needs an update or they don't care that it needs an update. One big issue with CVEs is this notion of the vulnerability economy. And the way in which vulnerability is discovered and disclosed impacts how organizations can respond to them. Here's the ideal scenario. I'm an ethical researcher. That doesn't mean a full-time researcher in a lab like they're sitting behind me on campus. Often they're individuals who work in tech. They can be teenagers, students, seniors, you name it, who just have this as a hobby. I think of them as sort of the ham radio operators of the 2020s. They like to play around on the internet. They find problems. Most major tech companies have what's called a bug bounty program, meaning if you find a flaw, you find a vulnerability, you report to the company, they pay you. It can be anywhere from hundreds of dollars to six figures, depending on how severe and serious it is. And you sign an agreement that you're going to keep quiet about it until a fix is available. In the security community, you get credibility or literally cred if you're known as someone who finds a lot of these flaws, so you want to publicize it. But you agree to keep quiet so that by the time you publicize it, it's hand in hand with a fix. And you usually don't provide what's called sample exploit code that provides people a roadmap of just how to use it. You keep it just obfuscated enough that someone can't take advantage. But the reality is what's called responsible disclosure doesn't always happen. As I mentioned earlier, in the case of the exploits involving the NSA back in the 2010s, nation states don't always report the flaws that they find. Sometimes they're used for aggressive operations. One of the USB stick examples that I had mentioned earlier happened with a virus called Stuxnet in the early 2010s, where the US and Israel most likely were involved in having an infected USB stick that they managed to get smuggled into an Iranian nuclear facility that was enriching uranium with centrifuges. Very large, expensive industrial equipment that has to spin at an exactly precise rate. And the software that was written there was written to exploit flaws in that controller code to slightly change how the centrifuge worked, and in the process destroy years worth of unenriched plutonium, uranium, I forget which nuclear fissile material, in order to set back Iran's program by years. So nation states have incentives to want to be able to take advantage of flaws, but that means everyone else who has that technology is at risk. And then secondly, cyber criminal groups increasingly are buying or researching so-called 0 days, which means these flaws that don't have, they're exploited on day 0. You don't have a day or 2 or 5 or 10 to fix them. You're at risk on day 0. On the right, you may have heard of MoveIt, which is a software program that is used for exchanging files securely between organizations. It's widely used. It's used by large organizations like banks, insurance companies, hospitals, higher education. We move student data, transcript data between institutions and a national student clearinghouse. It's not common everyday software, but large organizations use it for sensitive data. A cybercrime group back in 2023 found a flaw in the MoveIt software that could give them ownership of it. They held that flaw until the beginning of a holiday weekend in the West, or in the US. And they used that to exploit every MoveIt server they could find on the internet all over the course of a weekend, install all the data they could get in a weekend. By, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday the next week, there was a patch for the MoveIt software, and you were encouraged to install it right away. But it was too late. There was no way to defend against this. There was no way to stop it. The vendor didn't know about it. None of their customers knew about it until it was already too late. And so many of us got multiple data breach notifications from that one event. And then there's some researchers who are just too eager and don't follow best practices when they announce these. But this risk of these 0 days and the economy of it, a company offers you, a certain amount of money in a bug bounty program, but then a bad actor offers you many times as much in order for them to have that and be able to exploit it. It's hard for the industry to keep up. Next, this problem of imperfect defenses comes up in other ways beyond vulnerabilities. So we're all used to software that warns us if there's a risky email. Just show you some of the cat and mouse game that goes on here. We buy, as our main defense, Microsoft's own capabilities, which are sort of widely used in the industry, and those blocked over 2 million malicious emails in 2024. As you know, we only have 2,000 students and about 1,000 employees, so you can see how much bad email is out there. Even with that, we got phishing reports every day. We actually pay for a second line of defense. That second scanner costs multiple times what Microsoft's cost, and it only blocked about 11,000 phishing emails in that same year. So a minuscule percentage. But the challenge is that those were the ones that the cyber criminals knew could get past Microsoft. These were the better emails. So even though you're blocking lots of low quality phishing, the only thing that really impacted how many phishing messages got through was investing in a second line of defense. One analogy we talk about is, we don't have to be perfect, but we have to be more perfect than others. We have to be further along. We don't want to be the slowest person being chased by a bear, right? So if most organizations are only buying the baseline, where we can, we buy a little above the baseline to make us a harder target. Another analogy I use with our staff is security is like a stack of Swiss cheese. You want to have enough pieces of Swiss cheese that you hope that the holes don't all line up and someone gets through. If you get through one hole in the slice of Swiss cheese, maybe you're blocked by the next layer or the next layer or the next layer. But the reality is, no matter what we do for buying defenses, the bad actors are tuning and adjusting their campaigns to get past those. And then finally, again, back to some of the challenges of having technology solve everything. There are choices that end users make, many of which are rational to them in terms of time and convenience, their memory, the tools they use, that make them more vulnerable. One of the biggest is password reuse. Most of us don't realize how many passwords we have and how many places they're in. I audited mine once and had more than 200 passwords on different sites. What's our natural tendency? I'm going to make one really good password. It's long, it's got special characters, upper, lowercase, the whole 9 yards, but I can remember it, and it's secure, so I'll use it everywhere. The problem is websites get hacked all the time. And one of the things they steal is your email address or your username and your password. Think of that as like finding a key in the middle of Davidson's campus, and you then go around and try every door on campus and see which ones it opens. So if I know your email address and a common password from breaching an airline, maybe your other airlines use the same password. Maybe your bank, you use the same password. Maybe your workplace, you use the same password. These are so common, we actually get notified by Microsoft when these happen. It's called credential stuffing, which is sort of like stuffing a ballot box, right? I've got these passwords. I'm just going to keep trying to make use of it where I can. Maybe I have multiples of these, or I'm just going to try random passwords on someone. So we see that that reuse of passwords a major risk, and I'll talk about in a few minutes here how you can defend against that. The second item is the kind of the reluctance to put in place multi-factor authentication, where you get that text message, or better, you have to use an app on your phone to sign in, or passkeys, which are a new and emerging security method that's a little less convenient, but is not able to be phished or stolen at present. Text message scams we've talked about. Email scams, there are the everyday ones, and then there's those that really try to target you. They research you. They spend 10 minutes Googling you and put together a message that seems compelling. Maybe they create a new email account for a person they think you know. There's all kinds of ways, and the more information that's out on the internet about you, the easier that is. In cases where your organization is doing business with another organization, they get compromised. Maybe their chief financial officer or someone in accounts payable, and now you're getting instructions to change where you wire funds, or being sent invoices for services that you think you may have gotten but you haven't, and now those funds are going somewhere else. There's all sorts of these attacks. Also, pirating or downloading movies illegally or software downloads illegally have very high risk that those contain malicious software that will break into your computer. So there's so many ways that an end user plays a role in their own safety. So given this, now that I've left you with an entirely hopeless situation, I want to be clear. The hopelessness is that this will ever go away. To me, there are too many factors to prevent this from going away. But what are some things that you can do to best stay safe? And I think we're going to try and circulate at least this slide after the talk, and I'm happy to share this with anyone who'd like it. First, as annoying as it is, always regularly update your devices. And if you can enable auto update on them so they update automatically, you wake up in the morning and your phone tells you, I have new software on me. That's a great thing to do. Secondly, and one of the most important things, is using a good password manager. So a lot of people are very nervous about the idea of a password manager, and they say, well, if people are hacking into accounts, if you break into my password manager, you steal all the passwords. If you're using a good, reputable password manager, there's a couple of things that mitigate that, and it has some risk, but it's a much lower and safer risk. First, password manager companies, if they're good at what they do, are very transparent about security. If they have an incident or a hacked, they let you know. LastPass, which we used to recommend and don't anymore, because after an acquisition, they had a security incident they didn't handle well, actually had the worst case scenario. Someone stole their database, but all the passwords were encrypted. So if you used a strong, unique master password, which is the password you enter to unlock the password manager and let it unlock your secrets, it took bad actors a long time, if ever, to be able to decrypt that. And people had realistically weeks to months to update their passwords on their various websites, so that those old passwords didn't work anymore. The nice thing with the password manager is I have a long password I use for my password manager, but then I let it pick random passwords for every account. They're usually between 30 and 60 characters long. I just have to copy and paste them into the application, and the password managers handle that part of it for you. But even if you break into a site and you steal my password for a certain bank, it's not the same password as any other bank or any email account or anything else. So that key that you found only works once. Third, you're going to start seeing websites offer you the ability to register for passkeys. If you can, for most critical services like your email account, using a passkey is a great idea. Again, it is resistant to phishing because there's actually a fully encrypted device-to-device secret exchange, and that tests for the fact that you're on the right site. So if a site is a lookalike site trying to steal your password, that won't work. Enabling multi-factor authentication. Ideally, if you do so, phone calls and text messages aren't a really secure way of doing it. Now, many organizations, even many banks and financial institutions, require you to do it that way. But there are so-called authenticator apps that you can download for your phone. You'll know that your two-factor is working this way if it gives you a QR code on the web page and you use your camera to scan that QR code, and you get like a 6-digit number that rotates in that app. Those are a more secure way of doing multi-factor authentication. Always do it if you can. If you can't, and just as best practice, you can also ask your cell carrier to put a SIM lock on your phone number to make it harder to steal. In this case, you need a separate password to authorize the transfer of your phone number. Again, could an insider take some actions? Potentially. But that's the best thing you can do to protect your number from being stolen. Activating a security freeze. This is the step beyond you have to go to beyond just getting regular security reports and the like. A security freeze prevents credit reports, prevents releasing your credit data to any organization unless you temporarily unfreeze your credit report. So if you need to sign up for a new bank account or take out a loan or purchase a car, you have to ask what credit bureau they use and call that bureau or multiple bureaus, and you're given a passcode to unlock your credit report. But a security freeze is the most secure way to actually protect your credit, and that's what a lot of people are stealing when they're trying to steal Social Security numbers and other information, are ways of either stealing your credit or access to medical insurance or other valuable resources that you want to protect. You always use appropriate security software for your devices, your computers, and so forth. Apple products do probably a better job. I like Apple as a company. I have an Apple laptop here, but they have an advantage that they control everything from the laptops they sell to the software. So they've made it kind of a closed environment. Microsoft makes software for everyone's hardware, and so it's same with Google and Android. Great software. Inherently, they tend to have more risks because it's more assembled and not all controlled end to end. So device security software is probably more critical on those devices. Some internet service providers and some home routers, like Amazon's Eero brand, also can now offer you services where they'll provide extra security services to provide protection at your home network layer. I actually like Eero, and other brands do this in that it's routinely downloading security updates and updating my router. That's the part of my home network that is exposed to all the bad things on the internet. So that's a really critical piece of technology. And it's one that folks probably let run too long for years and years and years after the end of life, and is good to keep updated. And then finally, anything you can do to help protect friends and family members who are in those vulnerable populations, like kids and teens and seniors. So I know that's a lot to remember. Again, happy to share this outside of this context, and we will stop here for questions. So let me go to the Q&A here. I see some great questions. Does Davidson College have a technology security officer? And if so, what are the responsibilities and expectations? So here's how we're structured for security. And I'd say this is a new position. A few years ago, we didn't have anyone dedicated to cybersecurity or information security. And you'll hear me use both of those terms. They're slightly different things, although we tend to lump them both under security. Cybersecurity is about protecting Davidson's systems and technologies, the things we own and contract for. So our technology, whatever's on it, wherever it is, even something that might not have sensitive data on it, we don't want to have broken into or compromised because, again, someone could move laterally through the organization and cause harm. Information security means protecting our information, particularly regulated information that there are legal or financial penalties for if they're breached, wherever that lives. So on cybersecurity, we protect systems in Davidson's control. Information security is about, with companies we buy software services from, reviewing their security, making sure their best practices are sufficient for the use case. And frankly, even a vendor that does everything right can be a victim of cybercrime. There is no vendor on this planet that is immune. Vendors can make them, and organizations can make themselves a harder target. But if you are any organization, you're at risk. So for us, it's about balancing, is this organization following best practices where we're minimizing the risk, but can't eliminate it. We have one position that is our information security program manager. They do things like making sure that we're deleting data we don't need from enterprise systems when we can, or working to review new technology we purchase, or doing training and awareness classes on campus. Also doing a lot to respond to some regulatory requirements we have annually around data. Then we have two individuals who are on the cybersecurity side. One of them goes through and looks at logs and events daily. So if we go through what are suspicious login events. If we see a login that doesn't look quite right, and this can be as simple as someone having a personal VPN software on their phone, and so they're in New York, but their VPN's connecting through Chicago, and they look like they're in two places at once. We go through and review those each day to make sure that we are finding someone if we happen to have a compromised account and shutting it down quickly, because that's kind of the first toehold. If you keep someone from getting a toehold into your systems, there's less they can do. But if they're in an account and they can start doing things, not only stealing data from that account, but seeing what else they can break into, your risk goes up. And then finally, we have a third person we split between our system administration team and our cyber team, who is an excellent systems engineer on Linux and Windows and all manner of operating systems, and does a lot more of our security projects and more advanced security work. And then we supplement that with outside consulting, both for testing, regulatory compliance. And I tell my team, use the consultants like a ref. If we get a situation that we're not sure of, we think it looks okay, but we're not absolutely positive, call the ref. That's what we pay those consultants for. Let's have them be the arbiter that takes a look at things. Name some good password managers, please. These are often changing. So, when you're doing this, it's always good to go out and take a look. We use 1Password, which is the number one followed by password, for some high-risk departments and our own internal use here in IT. Personally, I use Bitwarden, which is another excellent software program. I used to recommend LastPass. Based on them having a poor response to a security event, I don't recommend them anymore, and I don't use them anymore. But 1Password and Bitwarden I've had very good experiences with, and would definitely recommend those. Next question we got is thoughts on biometrics instead of written password. Have you seen or heard of any institutions moving in that direction? That's a really interesting question. So there's different ways of doing biometrics. Oftentimes with your phone, when you do a Face ID or a Touch ID, there's actually and this is the way passkeys work as well. There actually is a password you don't know, and it's hidden in what's called a secure enclave, or a secure part of your phone or your device. And the device says, when you authenticate with your fingerprint or your face, let's go ahead and release that secret and release that to the site. So biometrics are usually just a way of unlocking a password. It's kind of a fancy password manager. And in fact, a lot of password managers now will manage your pass keys for you. So a lot is moving in that direction. Organizations don't tend to use biometric data directly to secure sites. So for instance, when you type in a password, it goes back to a server that checks your password and says, yes, that's the right password. No, that's the wrong one. I don't know of anybody who, when they scan your fingerprint, sends your fingerprint back to say, yes, that's you, no, it's not. And the reason is simple. Your facial geometry that the Face ID scans, or your fingerprint, you can never change. So if those were stolen, you can't ever change your fingerprint the way you can change a password. So biometrics as a way to get into a device are through Face ID or through unlocking a password manager are a very good way of security for that, but it's not a sole method. I would also note, and this is coming up with some of our discussion to faculty thinking about international travel, as there's been more questions about experiences at national borders. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'll give that disclaimer up front, but as I have been informed by the news and ACLU and other organizations, you can't be compelled in the US to reveal a password or a passcode to a device, because that's information you have, and you can argue that providing it is self-incrimination. But nothing's preventing a border agent from holding your locked phone to your face and unlocking and having access to the device. So some individuals are nervous about biometrics from the current legal precedent, although I expect that legal precedent is going to change over time. Thank you for that question. Are password managers on iPhones and Microsoft considered strong? Your web browsers, Google Chrome is offering to save your passwords. Safari is offering that. iCloud wants to save them. Microsoft's browser wants to save them. Everyone wants to be integral to your digital life, and they're offering to save these passwords. It's probably a double-edged sword. I sort of subscribe to the notion that an independent password manager that's not directly in the browser is slightly better, because of the fact that your web browser is on the front line of the internet. Every website you go, every malicious ad that shows up on a web browser, those are risks to hack your browser. And there's a type of malware called info stealers, and they do just what it sounds like. They try to steal data from your browsers, cookies, tokens, things that can be used to present like it's you at a website. So browsers are kind of a high risk front layer of the browser of your device. Now, on the other hand, most password managers have extensions that plug into your browsers, so they're only somewhat separated from it. For perfect security, I'd probably use them, or should never say perfect security, more perfect security, more segmentation from the browser, but you lose the convenience factor. I think they do a good job, those password managers, but I still like having another layer in there. We try to avoid in technology purchasing having all of the everything under one vendor, right? If I don't want to be all Microsoft or all Apple or all Google. I'd kind of like to have products from each of them because they each might get different threat intelligence, different knowledge about security risks. So there's value in sourcing things from various sites. I've read that more and more coding is to be done in the future using AI. Do you think this will increase or decrease potential vulnerabilities? I don't want to be alarmist, but there was actually just an interesting article out today that one of the former executives of Mandiant, one of the major cybersecurity companies, gave a talk expressing their deep concern about AI being used for effective cyber attacks. So we're going to see AI make coding more automated. I think AI is going to be able to write very good code. It's probably going to do is whether it's doing code solely or it's doing a first draft for humans to review or humans' first draft gets reviewed by AI. I think it can make things safer. But AI is just as likely to be used by bad actors to find new exploits. So I think what you're seeing is just sort of the increase of an arms race, and it's going to make better defenses possible, but also bad actors have more power to do bad things. Whether that's writing a more effective phishing email, if I paste information about an individual and say, pretend that you are the long lost college friend of so and so, and write them a message, make sure to mention their spouse's name is this, and write this, they're well educated, write this like a PhD holding individual. An individual, especially for whom English might not be their first language, is less likely to write a convincing phishing email. But now you have a tool writing a great email. Now apply that across all of the kinds of risks we talked about, and I think AI is going to be a double-edged sword for security. That's a great question. Thank you. Can you speak to use of personal VPN for added protection? So what VPNs do is they encrypt your traffic between you and the VPN service. It still ends up on the regular internet when all is said and done. But if you're traveling internationally, if you are on an untrusted network like hotel Wi-Fi or coffee shop Wi-Fi, it gives another layer of protection. If someone has compromised the network, it's going to be harder to steal your data. So a personal VPN can be good. Again, you get what you pay for. I would never trust a free service. How good is that free service? I don't have a lot of experience with personal VPNs. Proton is a company that has a good reputation in terms of security, whether it's their Proton Mail, email, or VPN services. I see that services like Wirecutter and the like that used to recommend it are recommending other services now, and these change frequently. So my advice would be to look at a good site like Consumer Reports or the Wirecutter, look at what they recommend for a personal VPN, but I wouldn't trust it forever. I would check every couple of years. They usually charge you annually or so. So always a good thing to keep updated. What one or two pieces of advice would you give our students? I think I would probably give, I don't know if we're talking about college age students here or K-12 students, but in general, I would encourage them to be suspicious about things that are presented, whether it's, is this information or misinformation or disinformation on the non-cybersecurity side, or is this email real? We see often, especially international students have often been the victims of this, things where people pretend to be the IRS or they pretend to be other law enforcement agencies, and your student visa is going to be revoked if you don't pay this $500 fine, and you have to do it right now. So the advice of be skeptical about things you're asked, and bring it to someone's attention. Bring it, in the case of a student, bring it to a faculty member, bring it to IT, call the campus police or the Dean of Students office. Get a second opinion, but recognize these scams are designed to increase pressure. They're designed to get you to act fast. It's the purchasing a timeshare approach, right? They don't want you to leave the room until you've written a check. And these bad actors will say, nope, you have to do this right now, or we're sending someone to arrest you. And I see that and they have some detail about you. I see that your phone number is this, or you're at this location. And it is it's very hard to develop that savvy, and unfortunately, a lot of people develop it only after having a bad incident happen. Thanks for that question. Is it an undue risk to leave open multiple websites for an extended period of time on your PC? In a lot of cases, the websites may be in the background, not loading and not active, but the more things you have open, sure, that probably is a theoretical risk. You're going to be something new not to sleep about tonight. So thank you for that question here. These have been terrific questions. I really appreciate the questions here and the interest folks have had. I'm really proud of my team and the work they do overall as an organization, and the folks throughout the college and IT. But very proud of our security team. We're not perfect. The vendors and the companies we use aren't perfect, but we do our best to try to reduce risk as much as we can and be good stewards for the college. So thanks for letting me share some of these misadventures with you all tonight.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with all of us and leading us in this conversation. I feel fairly confident to speak for most, if not everyone on the call, to say you gave us a lot to think about. And we really just want to finally thank everyone for joining us this evening. We hope that you, again, enjoyed tonight's program. Again, thank you, Kevin, and we hope that everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.